All right, that's the President of the United States addressing the media there in response, of course, to this breaking news that Justice Kennedy is no longer going to be on the Supreme Court. He has announced his retirement. So he did say that they're looking at someone new. He was questioned, who do you want to replace him with? And he said, well, we got about 25 on the list. Don't forget, they had looked for Neil Gorsuch's spot. And some of those names include Thomas Hardiman, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Barrett, a 45-year-old attorney recently appointed to one of the U.S. Circuit Courts, mother of 7, by the way, Amal Tharpin. We have a list of 25, according to the president, that one could go through right now. Here with me, Misty Maris. I jumped on it maybe because, I'm a mother. I looked at a mother of 7. She's a professor at Notre Dame, and she recently was appointed as a judge. She was actually one of the president's appointments. Let me humor me for a minute, because I think it'd be kind of interesting, given the backlash he has seen about his, so many on the left, their concerns, and, some of it's justified, some of it isn't, about his, how shall we say, interaction with women. If he appoints a mother to the Supreme Court, I just think it's interesting, and maybe because she's the only female on the list.
I mean, she's already been appointed by him to a prestigious position, right? A federal court judge. That is unbelievable. 7 kids. Well, that would be the ultimate test of work-life balance, I would say.
I'd say. But anyway, give us some insight, Misty, in terms of what you think he might do. Which direction sort of is he going overall? I mean, should we be looking, say, to Thomas Hardiman, who was almost the pick that he chose before going with Neil Gorsuch?
Right. I think you should be looking at Thomas Hardiman, and many people have said that Brett Kavanaugh was also right there, the next person that he was in competition with Gorsuch. So those two, I'd say right now, those are the two we should be looking at. And look, they're very
well, and also Brett Kavanaugh, I should point out, because he is being floated by some folks in D.C. as the potential successor to Kennedy. And he has a very interesting and conservative background, sort of seen as one of Ken Starr's proteges.
Right, exactly. And with both of them, though, one of the things when you have federal court judges who are up for these positions, you're going to be able to go back into their decisions. The Supreme Court is not a far stretch from what they're doing on the bench every day. So there's going to be a lot to look at in the decisions that they've made in their positions thus far that are going to help us with that roadmap of where we see the court going. And certainly that's what the president is going to be looking at and did look at when he created this list of, 20 or 25 before Gorsuch actually filled that seat. But Brett Kavanaugh is certainly someone to look at, Thomas Hardiman as well.
All right, we got quite a list. We'll be spending a lot of time on it in the coming days. Joining me right now is Republican pollster Justin Wallen and Democratic strategist Scott Bolden. Let me just start with you, Mr. Wallen. How does this change the political calculus? I mean, one would think the base on both sides, right, would be kind of fired up right now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anytime you're talking about a potential Supreme Court nomination, it tends to have a greater impact with a presidential election than with congressional, but it no doubt galvanizes the base on both sides. And we've seen candidates arcing left and arcing right as the primary season continues. I think that'll only heighten, and I think those partisan cues become harder and harder as those candidates start talking about the impact or potential impact of Supreme Court nomination.
Scott, does it put the Democrats at all at a disadvantage? Only because I think about evangelicals that really were voting for Donald Trump on the basis of his effect on the Supreme Court. In fact, 87% of evangelicals came out for Donald Trump. I talked to some of them. Many of them told me, look, I'm not hiring my preacher. I'm hiring a chief executive for the United States of America, and I care very much about the direction of the court from a religious value perspective. So again, when we think of the political calculation to all of this and what it means for midterms, will it excite a lot of these people in the so-called base on both sides?
Well, it certainly will excite the You're absolutely right. Evangelicals have been parsing through Donald Trump for a minute, but I think they will be excited and energized because you remember Kennedy was a swing vote. He certainly was pro-abortion rights. He was certainly pro-gay rights, which was surprising and enraged many evangelicals. On the Democratic side, we live in tough places because we don't control any one of those three houses or the judiciary. And so this swing vote, which was a savior for the Democrats now, Donald Trump has an opportunity to appoint a real conservative. The real question for Donald Trump in the midterms, does he go hard with a conservative, a true conservative, like former partner of mine, like Tom Hardiman, or does he go with a moderate Republican and replace a swing vote with another swing vote? My gut is he's going to go with the hardline conservative because that's what this country, or at least the Republicans want, and the House and the Senate want, and he's going to stick to what he knows and what has delivered him so far.
Do you agree with that, Justin? Will he go with a hardline conservative?
I believe that's the easy choice. Yeah, I agree with that statement entirely. It's going to please the broadest component of his base, and it's going to galvanize the most likely to come out and vote in this midterm, which, of course, it's a smaller group of people than you normally see. So he's really got to excite those folks, and this is a good opportunity.
Did Justice Kennedy, Misty, pick rather poor timing? I mean, or political timing to run? I mean, just when you think of the excitement, by the way, we got plenty of excitement, too much excitement, I'd say, these days in America on both sides. And now you're going to galvanize both groups of people once again, whether it be immigration, whether it be the issue of abortion. I mean, there are still so many things right now that people are so polarized on. So with that in mind, what do you think of the timing of this resignation?
Well, the timing, absolutely, Trish, the timing is definitely important here. But again, it's been rumored for a while that Kennedy was going to retire. We were all watching today, expecting that this might happen. But at the end of the day, while there certainly is an impact on the political aspects, a Supreme Court justice is supposed to be deciding on the law, and politics really shouldn't be playing a role.
Yeah, look, I agree with you. And this is what Alan Dershowitz was saying. And you got to give Alan so much credit because you know what? Nobody invites him to dinner on Martha's Vineyard anymore. All his liberal friends, they just look the other way. It's like he doesn't even exist because he's actually defended the Constitution and this president, even though, as he pointed out, he doesn't always agree with the policies. But it would be nice, Misty, to get someone who was intellectually honest as opposed to a partisan rep there, at least when it comes to the Supreme Court. Thank you so much, guys. A very big hour we have just had.